Very good morning to you, and welcome once again to the Algarve circuit here in Portimão, where the sun is shining and the Formula 3 cars are making their way out onto the track now for what is effectively round 27, race 27 of the series, and a slight delay to proceedings as the cars are only now being released from the pit lane, and that primarily brought about Leo Gorman from the motorsportarchive.com alongside me because of another single-seater incident on track just ahead of this race.
Yes, indeed, Dave. There was a single-seater category just on before us. It was a mixture of old Formula Vs and Formula 4s, but it seems as if someone had a bit of an engine failure or something along those lines, and it spilt an awful lot of oil and other fluid all over the track, causing several cars to go flying off in the final corner. There's a truck out there at the moment laying down concrete dust and other solutions to clear the track, but that just means a little bit of a delay to the start of this race.
Of course, what it also means is that potentially the opening lap, as we get towards the end of the opening lap, going to be very interesting indeed.
It could be very tricky, but I tell you something, these race engineers, they're clued up, they know what they're doing. They're going to be on the headsets to their drivers saying, watch out for that concrete dust going through the final corner, don't get dirt on your tyres.
Well, of course, we had one of those race engineers with us in comms yesterday, Adam Hardy, and that's exactly what he would have said. You're absolutely right. Well, it's been a bit of a Prema Power Team success fest thus far over the course of the weekend. Prema Power Team, as you can see, the dust now being kicked up as the cars on their way to the grid, and that's an awful lot of dust that's gone down there, isn't it?
Well, maybe they're not quite as up to date with the cloud of dust are on the circuits, but the drivers certainly know about it now. Especially, it would come a bit of a surprise to some of them because it's right over the crest of that hill coming into the last couple of bends.
So, as I was saying, it's been thus far a bit of a Prema Power Team success fest, hasn't it? And they are the ones that really seem to have got the measure of this circuit. Here's the order then for race 3, and to reinforce what I was saying about Prema Power Team: P1, Felix Rosenquist; P2, Lance Stroll; P3, Jake Dennis. 3 Prema Power Team drivers occupying the top 3 positions on the grid. Then we see George Russell for Carlin, Gustavo Menezes also for Carlin, then it's Marcus Pommer, Mikael Jensen, Sergio Sette Camara, then it's Pietro Fittipaldi, and Callum Illett goes from P10. Next bunch of rows: Charles Leclerc for Van Amersfoort, then it's Dorian Boccolacci, Ryan Tvita, Antonio Giovinazzi with big work to do from the 7th row of the grid. Then it's Nick Cassidy, Maximilian Günther, Alexander Sims for High Tech GP, then it's Chang, Lorandi and Jeffrey rounding out the next few rows of the grid for this FIA F3 European Championship race. Santino Ferrucci has provided great entertainment over the course of the weekend and will do the same from P21. Phil Shaw, Raul Hyman, Beretta, Moreno, Tatiana Calderon, Arjun Maini, Matt Rao, Matt Solomon, Sam McLeod and Kong occupying positions 21 through until 30 on the grid, with Alexander Alban relegated to the very back of the grid for not providing the 1 kilogram fuel sample that is needed.
Absolutely, Dave. I mean, that's one of those things that you would think is actually quite fundamental in running cars at this level in Formula 3 or even in higher championships, but mistakes do happen, and as a result, Albon's at the back.
Adam was saying yesterday, that really is that is the team's fault. You can't put any of the blame of that onto the driver Alexander Albon, who had he was benefited by 2 safety cars yesterday, but got within 2-3 places of a points-paying position from the very back of the grid. It was an awesome drive for Alexander Albon. I accept he was a beneficiary of 2 safety car periods, but nonetheless.
Absolutely, and it'll be a little bit more galling for not just him but also the signature team, because Albon, he finished second in race 2.
Absolutely.
The opportunity for big points there, and Albon is in a little bit of a battle for with a couple of other rookies, George Russell and Lance Stroll, for 5th in the championship. So to lose those kind of points he'd be very disappointed by that.
Yes, been a very sort of good mid-season charge from Alexander Albon, to be honest with you. Okay, the cars making their way down onto the grid as we speak. Just a short delay, as we mentioned, because of that slight collision earlier in a single-seater race, which took out a number of cars and therefore put some fluid onto the track. And there we can see the number 23 car of Sergio Sette Camara, the Moto Park racer. Just going back to my saying that Prema Power Team really have unlocked this circuit. just to put some information into that, if you like, it's the first time that the FIA Formula 3 European Championship has ever been here at the Algarve circuit in Portimão. They did a 2-day test, Tuesday, Wednesday, during the course of the week before the race weekend got underway. So it's the first running, and it's the first data collection opportunity that they had is during that test. And in discussions yesterday, Prema Power Team, clearly, they seem to have got the measure of this circuit, maybe somewhat quicker than some of the other teams, although Carlin did catch up a bit during race 2 yesterday.
Absolutely, and one of the other notes I came across over the weekend.
Okay.
Prema were here last week with some Formula Master cars, so their drivers, nice little bit of quiet running. And you know what? It's fair game. They have the cars. It's not an unknown tactic in championships where if you go to a circuit where your drivers have never been before, you get maybe an older car or maybe a different championship car. You can do a little bit of testing, private testing, a little bit of running, not breaking any rules because they're not running in Formula 3 cars, but the drivers have got laps of the circuit. In saying that, as you say, Carlin seemed to have caught up a small bit. They were struggling with the rear end all the way through race 1. Made some changes to the rear of the car. It's a lot more stable now. They're able to keep the tyres in good nick for much longer. And as such, Russell starting P4, Menezes starting P5
Absolutely.
Could actually be a threat today.
We get a thumbs up from Jake Dennis. He's had a great weekend. He goes from P3. We've already seen Felix Rosenqvist, the pole sitter, and Lance Stroll, who goes from P2. And to reinforce what you were saying about Carlin, how they've crept up now, George Russell is going from P4. Good to see George Russell with a great opportunity to do some good from P4 on the grid. The young Norfolk star in car number 10, George Russell, running for the Carlin team. And then we see Gustavo Menezes, who looked very, very lively yesterday, did Gustavo Menezes, the Chigonia I am with Carlin. Gustavo Menezes taking a P4 in the race yesterday.
And Marcus Palmer on screen now. And Marcus Palmer was previously a German Formula 3 championship. You know, it's been a difficult year at times for Marcus Palmer with a motor park team. It started very, very slowly, took him a while to actually really get his head around, I suppose, these upper level Formula 3 cars. But you know what, they've actually got results together now. They're scoring on a regular basis and have taken a win this year too.
So we see very, very close up there of the Mikkel Jensen car. Also, crucially, the Hankook tyres that, of course, the FIA Formula 3 cars run. Now, a bit of rain overnight that we were discussing, whether that has cleaned the track a bit, and whether it's just the possibility that having maybe taken some of the rubber away, the tyre dead could be a bit higher in race 3.
Absolutely, and you know what? It's not just that it rained last night and cleared the circuit, it's also much hotter today. The humidity that we had yesterday as well, and the high winds that we had on Friday, that's all gone. It's disappeared very nicely over the weekend. It's actually quite hot today. It was great if you want to get a suntan.
Not so good if you're in a conservatory commentary booth like me and you at the moment.
There is that, but you know what, it changes the conditions a small bit. This is actually closer to the conditions that the drivers tested with on Tuesday and Wednesday, so they will have some information. It's not going to be a completely blind race for the engineers and the drivers.
We've just seen Pietro Fittipaldi for Fortec Motorsports, and now it's Callum Ilott that we look at in the VW powered car. Of course, a mix of VW, NBE engines and also Mercedes-Benz. All of them Dallara chassis. But as we mentioned in the programme yesterday, as we look at Charles Leclerc for Van Amersfoort Racing, and in conversations with Fritz Van Amersfoort, it's taken them a while to unlock the secrets to this Portimão circuit, has to be said. And Fritz was very honest in his discussing that with me yesterday. But going back to what I was saying about Dallara chassis, there's a possibility that another chassis could be making its way into the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. Tell me more, Lee.
Absolutely. It's a Russian single-seater company called Artline Technology. They've been constructing a Formula 3 car that we believe is not quite set to the rules as such. But they are still looking to enter a race this year. They were supposed to be here in Portimão, have decided to go testing again at a private track in Georgia. We may see them at the Zandvoort Masters in a few weeks. We may see them at Nürburgring in a few weeks' time. Will they arrive We haven't heard anything yet.
Well, Nürburgring is the next venue for the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. As we reach the sharp end of the championship now, it is just Nürburgring and the big Hockenheim finale to come to what has been a very, very hectic championship. Lots and lots of running for the FIA Formula 3 cars and drivers, as we now look at Antonio Giovinazzi, who was leading the points going into this round, now has seen that top step of the points chart ebb away to the benefit of Felix Rosenqvist. Antonio Giovinazzi was running last weekend made his debut in a DTM race in for Timo Scheider. He had taken part in the Audi Young Driver test in the DTM cars, and whether he's had aspirations to try and get a DTM drive, they may have been taught a blow by Dieter Gas, the head of Audi DTM, saying that his driver setup is safe for the next season. So perhaps Antonio Giovinazzi may be having his sights set elsewhere for the next season. At the moment, he is P2 in the championship. It's very close between Rosenqvist and Giovinazzi, but Giovinazzi with an awful lot of work to do, and he's given himself a lot of work in all three of the races. Maximilian Günther, the Case-Styler 24 Mucker Motorsport driver, in the familiar Case-Styler 24 Mucker Motorsport colours. Absolutely sure. I've seen Peter Mucker this weekend yet.
I don't believe I've seen him either, actually.
Oh, okay. Peter Mucker is certainly down there on the grid. We also saw Nick Cassidy, and we'll talk a bit about Nick Cassidy in just a moment. But a new team into the FIA Formula 3 European Championship is High-Tech GP. Their pilot is Alexander Sims, who is the current leader of the British GT Championship, and one heck of a talented driver. It's good to see him back on the grid, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Alexander Sims, he's been here before. He raced in British F3, and he did a stint in European F3 a couple of years ago. You know, High-Tech are here really to test their car, to get miles. They want to return to the championship. The thing with High-Tech this weekend, because they're not entered into the series themselves, Sims is going to go around with the field, but he will start from the pit lane. It'll be interesting to see how they gauge their entry for next year.
Yeah. Nick Cassidy, I mentioned, we saw him sadly off into the gravel towards the end of the race yesterday, didn't we, with what we think is probably either a front or rear brake failure.
It seemed a lot more like a rear brake failure.
Yes.
Nick appeared to be locked onto the front as he entered into the gravel trap in turn one yesterday. The rear wheels kept on spinning. Nick's had an unfortunate race weekend, but you know what? He's shown his pace, he's shown his mettle, he's shown that he can actually drive these cars very well, and it's not just an extra race weekend for Nick. He's actually he's displaying his talents to the rest of this field as well.
Yeah, of course, yes, of course, and he's having great success in the championships that he's running in at the moment.
Absolutely, he's a joint leader of the Japanese Formula 3 Championship, racing with Petronas Tom's teams, and he actually raced in Super GT last weekend as well, the Suzuka 1000 kilometre race in the 300 category. Finished 21st overall. So you know what, Nick, he's a clever young guy. He's looking around at his options, and this won't hurt to be racing in front of the GT teams here with Blancpain as well. Another
one like Alexander Sims, isn't he? Who's can put his feet into any cockpit almost.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, some nice creative shots then from our cameraman as we look at the perhaps unfortunate Alexander Albon, who has to start from the very, very back of the pack by virtue of the fact that he didn't, or his team didn't provide a kilo's worth of fuel to be sampled.
And the other thing as well, Albon, it probably won't be much comfort to him, but he's starting 31st instead of 32nd. As, we are one car short for this race.
Yes, we are missing Mahavir Raghunathan, and why are we missing Raggy?
That's a very apt description. Raghunathan unfortunately was involved in an incident yesterday with several other cars which saw him excluded from the race. He did actually have an off under a safety car as well, so it's unfortunate for the motor park driver. He's struggled a little bit this year. But you know what? We've been saying all year that stewards need to really take action against poor driving standards and track limits. They have done so in this instance, and Raghunathan is excluded.
Extraordinary, because we were saying yesterday there were some track limits issues. There were plenty which went unpunished. Truthfully,
yeah, absolutely.
You and I called an awful lot of them. Raghunathan not the only one that had a penalty, his penalty, the most severe. He's been excluded, but Arjun Maini got a 10-place grid drop, and Matt Rao with a drive-through penalty, which is going to have to be taken.
Matt Rao had an incident with Raoul Hyman at the start of yesterday's race. He went into the rear of Hyman. He's to take a drive-through penalty within the first few laps of this race.
So the circuit then, following the very first of the private test session that they took part in earlier this week, the circuit was adjusted and an additional turn was put in, turn 1A, which is a chicane clearly off the back of turn 1, because turn 1 was proving too difficult for everyone to adhere to the track limits. You're seeing the cars go through turn 5 now, which is quite a pinch point, as they have a long run down. Well, it's uphill first of all from turn 4, then over the crest, and it's downhill into turn 5, through the sweeping turn 6, then 15 turns on this circuit, and we watch the cars being led away by Felix Rosenqvist, who is pole position, then Jake Dennis, Lance Stroll, I beg your pardon, who is P2, then it's Jake Dennis is P3, and George Russell then best showing in terms of qualifying start for George Russell to go from P4. Be expecting good things from the Carlin driver, and there they are, Jake Dennis and George Russell. Then we see Gustavo Menezes, and I was saying that yesterday, for my money, the driver of the day was Alexander Albon, who from the very back of the grid got to within 2 or 3 places of being in the points. Benefited, of course, from a couple of safety cars that were brought out during the course of the race. Another one that, for my money, has been very, very entertaining has been Santino Ferrucci.
Absolutely, and Santino, he's starting from 21st position. Whether he can actually make points of that at the moment is going to be quite difficult. He's 11th in the championship, and he kind of sees the top 10 in points as a possibility.
Yes.
Especially he's eyeing his teammate Max Gunther, who is 8th in the championship. Still, it's a long way to go. There's 7 races left, including this one. But with Gunther starting further up the grid in 16th place, Santino's got a lot of work on his hands.
Well, his work ethic is such that he will go forward. There's no question about that. Whether he can make it into a points-bound finish, well, we are about to find out. We have a 35-minute race to come from the FIA Formula 3 European Championship here at the Portimão circuit in the Algarve, where it is a balmy day. It's gorgeous, perhaps the best weather that we've had over the course of the race weekend, and as Lee was saying, it's much more in keeping with the weather conditions that they had for the test sessions.
And just a note, as the cars begin to form up in the grid, you'll see the front of the field with Felix Rosenqvist and Stroll. They've been up there for a while now. The rest of the field's only just coming around the final corner, as you see Sims pulling into the pits for his pit lane start.
Yep.
The guys at the front, they're losing tyre temperature,
Absolutely.
They're losing tyre pressure. It's such a big field, it's actually taken a very long time for them to completely line up on the grid. They'll just be they're at the front waiting. Come on, let's go. It's a point I made yesterday. It's a real disadvantage for those front runners that they do have to wait, and the last car is only now coming into grid as we look at the Van Amersfoort Racing. We await the marshal at the rear of the grid to give us the green flag to say that happy with the way that the grid is formed and that we can go away and racing. Final car then is Sam McLeod has pulled into the grid position. We get the green flag. I'm looking for Alexander Albon. So start sequence underway now. Let's go racing. The FIA Formula 3 European Championship then is away here at the Portimão circuit. And George Russell then. Looks like Jake Dennis has actually got around the outside of Stroll into turn 1. Got a much better start. Russell is there, but is Stroll going to get back into turn 2?
Well, Stroll is certainly trying to fight Jake Dennis. Jake Dennis made the early move and did make that position count. George Russell now going around the outside of Lance Stroll as well. So not only is Lance Stroll having to attack, but defend also.
And also a good start there from Charles Leclerc. Made up a couple of positions as some drivers go flying off the circuit into the tarmac Roma Furrier.
Raoul Hyman is one that didn't get away from the start, we're being informed, as they go through off the back of turn 5 now and head up towards the kink that is turn 6. Mikkel Jensen, another one that didn't get away. It's Mikkel Jensen in car number 27 that did not manage to get away, the K-Styler 24 Muka Motorsport driver. Charles Leclerc, we can see at the head of that pack in car number 7, and then it was Dorian Boccolacci as
Oh, and someone's had a lot of damage there. I believe, is that Gunther?
Well, that is Marcus Pommer. So Pommer is one of those, the motor park driver involved in that. We couldn't quite see who the Mooker Motorsport car was there. Be able to ascertain that from the timing screen in a moment as we watch in Santino Ferrucci. So it is Maximilian Gunther who is out.
And that is an unusual situation in that
safety car.
Gunther, who was actually further down the field, Jensen quite a well up the pack. So if they've come together, either one's had a good start, one's had a bad start, and maybe
yes.
both of them have had
absolutely. So safety car is going to be deployed, and Giovinazzi has managed to get himself into the points P10, and safety car is not going to be able to pick them up because you can see the safety car at the pit lane there.
Yeah, the safety car has completely missed the field, so
it has.
They're going to have to go around the kind of much safety car speeds. I mean, that's an unfortunate situation. The safety car in this situation is there to be as a kind of speed guide, especially if there's a car that's broken on a circuit. I don't know if a safety car is actually broken itself, which would be absolutely novel. Certainly not as broken as Gunther. And
discussion between the two of them there, and doesn't appear to be any animosity at all. Well, hopefully we'll get to see exactly what did happen.
I think they're discussing physics, actually, in that particular, the way they're waving their hands about in such an animated fashion. But going back to the start, that's a key one for Jake Dennis, jumping ahead of Lance Stroll.
Yes.
He needs as many points as possible. He's quite far behind in the championship.
Yeah. But we said yesterday, Lee, and actually it was you that said it, and I have to concede that you're absolutely right. Some good results from Jake Dennis, and he is going to buy himself into championship potential, isn't he? He sits P4 at the moment. He has got a lot of work to do, and he's got to turn every race into a very good result.
Absolutely, but you know what? Jake Dennis, he's 62 points behind at the moment. He's not going to launch himself to the top of the title standings in one go, but what he can do is pick people off one by one. He's not got much time to do it. Leclerc, good start, went from 11th up to 8th place at the moment, so he would collect 4 points if he were to finish now. And Gustavo Menezes,
he's out.
Is
So we've lost Gustavo Menezes as well.
But as I was coming back to saying, Russell or Dennis could go some way to taking chunks out of Leclerc, his gap to Leclerc. He could have third place in the championship very soon. Rosenqvist, he's in the lead. He's gunning for those 25 points for the win. That will extend his gap to Giovinazzi, who at the moment is only 10th.
But of course, Giovinazzi's poor weekend this weekend has played into the hands of Jake Dennis quite a bit, hasn't it? In terms of that, he's maximising his points haul because Giovinazzi is not scoring what we would expect Giovinazzi to score ordinarily.
Absolutely, but the other aspect of Giovinazzi's performance is you look at Russell, who's up there in 4th place at the moment, Menezes, who's unfortunately out but started 5th. Giovinazzi really shouldn't be down on the 7th row of the grid.
No.
He had a bad start yesterday. He lined up 5th in the grid for race 2, but was 10th by the end of lap 1. If you're going for a championship, you can't make those mistakes. You need to be consistent. You need to win, but you also need those podiums, those points finishes. You can't sacrifice positions if you're going up against Prema Power Team, Felix Rosenqvist and Jake Dennis.
Here's the replay then of the incident.
So that's Menezes, that's Giovinazzi, who squeezes Palmer, and Gunther went into the back of him. Well,
that all started with Giovinazzi.
Yeah, Giovinazzi, who made a good start coming from the 7th row. That was. It's hard to say whether one driver is at fault or not. But Giovinazzi had the inside, but Palmer went to the outside, and Gunther, who had speed, launched over the back of him.
Here's the start once again. So as the cars make their way down to turn 1, Jake Dennis trying to put that move on Lance Stroll, and at that point he had succeeded, and it was there that he had to remain absolutely committed, and he did so, and Lance Stroll did come back, and of course George Russell was in there, P4, was going to have a look as well, but Jake Dennis, that was a good move from him, and bold and ambitious from George Russell to try and have a go as well, wasn't quite able to make it work.
Absolutely, and Lance Stroll, you know, he's a rookie driver, he's quick. Okay, he's had a number of incidents this year, but, you know, we're here in Formula 3, this is about learning. It's about not just racing, not just overtaking, but learning how to start properly, learning about your car, learning how to race. And if he's maybe made a small error, get a sluggish getaway from the line, Jake Dennis, he's the kind of driver in his second year who will take advantage of that and absolutely find his way through.
Yeah, you're right. So there is Antonio Giovinazzi then, that we have been talking about, who is P10, and he has Ryan Tvita behind him.
Important to note there as well on our timing screen is this incident between car 28, which is Gunther, and car number 34, which is Palmer, under investigation. That's not to say they're not investigating Giovinazzi's role in it as well. It's just that those two drivers happen to be the two who were the ultimate victims in that incident. So
there we see the Marcus Palmer car being pulled away, and the car's weaving from side to side. The reason for that, they're trying to keep some temperature into those tyres, aren't they? Having only completed just a handful of laps, and some of those under the safety car, trying to keep some temperature into those Hankook tyres. Rosenqvist, our race leader. Now, an interesting point is, yesterday, 2 times of asking, Rosenqvist had to restart the race from behind the safety car, one of which he was he had almost come to a stop on the restart. Now, I know you made it to the press conference. I didn't quite get there in time, and he did explain his position, didn't he?
Yeah, Rosenqvist was not the most complimentary of the safety car driver. Said he was actually far too slow when out on track. I don't know whether that's the safety car driver is tuned to what the GT guys are supposed to be doing, but Felix quite noted that he needed to be going faster on the safety car, and to actually just make sure he didn't overtake the safety car when that car pulled in. They actually had to really slow the pack down. Unfortunately, that meant in the field there was almost a few collisions.
You're absolutely right, as they all bunched up, and well, Felix Rosenqvist has been an absolute master at bunching everyone up and then absolutely flooring it and getting away. And of course, it's the job of Jake Dennis and Lance Stroll and George Russell to try and anticipate when Felix Rosenqvist is going to go.
And who was P2 in those 2 safety car restarts yesterday?
I know. Let's see. What will Jake Dennis do this time? And is he going to, you know, certainly the second safety car incident, Dennis anticipated Felix Rosenqvist's move much better, didn't he?
It's third time of asking, and the restart line is just before the entry to the pit lane, so he's going to be ready, he's going to be waiting, he knows Felix now at this stage. The safety car pulls away as the field about bunch up once again, ready to go.
So we keep our eyes on the Racing Steps Foundation driver that is Jake Dennis. Then he is right on the gearbox of the Felix Rosenqvist car.
But don't count out George Russell though. No. You know, he's keeping just behind Lance Stroll as the field begins to pull away, and Rosenqvist goes for it.
So Felix Rosenqvist then leads the cars away from this safety car restart. P1 is Felix Rosenqvist. He had to do this 2 times of asking yesterday, has to do it again early on in this race for the FIA Formula 3 European Championship, as they come across the timing line now. And they head into turn 1, and turn 1 is perhaps the first opportunity, as Lance Stroll just took a look at Jake Dennis there, didn't he? George Russell not quite as close behind Lance Stroll as we expected him to be. Charles Leclerc there. Very, very exciting this as we get it underway and get back to real racing.
And a little bit of a touch there between Russell and Stroll as it came out of the turn 1A, part of the chicane in into turn 2. No real damage. Oh, and a little bit of a wobble there from Antonio Giovinazzi as they come into turn 5 and take the exit. He's right behind Boccolacci in the signature Volkswagen at the moment, who in turn is chasing Leclerc.
So then Felix Rosenqvist, he has the opportunity now to get up the road and not be troubled, because he has absolutely nobody ahead of him. Keeping an eye on Antonio Giovinazzi and Dorian Boccolacci then.
And Ryan Tvita is there as well. He had a battle with Cassidy, who's up to 12th, and Ferrucci, who's jumped up to 13th.
See, he was good yesterday, and Ferrucci is on another charged day as we watch Antonio Giovinazzi, the Gonya IM with Carlin driver then, who's P2 in the championship.
And I believe he may have actually got Tvita at that stage. That's Callum Milot, who's further down who's in the bottom end of the top 10.
So just seeing on the screen the drive-through penalty for Matt Rowell, which, to be fair, we knew about anyway.
That has to be taken under green. As we said at the start of the race, it has to be taken in the first few laps of the race, as that is a battle of position.
That's McLeod getting past Tatiana Calderon.
Yes. Matt Rowell has to take that penalty in the first 3 laps of the race, but it has to be a green lap before he can actually take that penalty. He can't take it under safety car. Calderon battling hard
To
there.
be fair,
Randy.
Calderon's fighting back, Lee. That's impressive from Tatiana Calderon. Absolutely side by side. This is great to watch.
Absolutely. She's had a difficult season. It's not been a huge amount of fun, I don't think, for Calderon at Carlin. She's not scored any points yet. She had several points finishes this year, and for whatever reason, it just hasn't happened for Tatiana in her, what is her third year now in Formula 3 racing.
Okay, well, Tatiana Calderon does lose out on that place, but she wasn't going to give it up. Neville Jeffrey, we can see in car number 22 as we go back to the front pack now.
I'd tell you another person who's making a move. We said it only a few moments ago, Ferrucci, 11th place. He's now just behind Giovinazzi, the one-time championship leader, to get into the points. And you know what, Antonio, he's locked behind Boccolacci still, and he's fighting to get further up into the points to kind of rescue this championship battle, but it's not really looking that good for him at the moment. Fittipaldi, P6 at the moment. He's got Leclerc just behind him, who's taking Callum Islet. And Leclerc, he's going to want to force his way past. And that is Boccolacci taking Islet for P8.
So Islet going to come back at him. Boccolacci has made it stick, hasn't he? Giovinazzi trying to buy into that as well, and so too, without question, will Santino Ferrucci.
It's been a difficult weekend for Boccolacci, especially in light of the fact he's got a teammate who scored a podium, and then yesterday in race 2 raced from the back of the field to just outside the points.
So Giovinazzi is just
and Giovinazzi, he's got Islet there. He's got Islet there now. That takes him into 9th place. He's gunning for Boccolacci. Giovinazzi gets a good exit out of the final corner. He's going to the inside of the start-finish straight. He's going for this move. Will it be? It's only 8th place. It'll only be 4 points, but he needs every score he can.
Absolutely.
Now to the outside as they come into turn 1, and then the outside of this line will turn into the inside as they go through to chicane. Boccolacci stays with him, but it's not enough. Giovinazzi gets another position.
Absolutely brilliant work there from Antonio Giovinazzi, who set that up 2 corners ahead, didn't he? And stuck it out around the outside.
And Giovinazzi, he needs to do that. He needs to make those positions. He's got a tougher competition now. He's got Leclerc just ahead. Leclerc has actually pulled a couple of seconds gap because he's fighting with Fittipaldi for 6th place.
Yes, and of course, whilst that was all been going on, that has played into the hands a little bit for Leclerc. So we see Boccolacci then and Nick Cassidy together.
And Dave Cassidy has actually got by Ferrucci there. They're battling over 11th, 12th and 13th at the moment.
That happened while that Giovinazzi move was going on, to be fair. Cassidy did manage to get past, but now Santino Ferrucci is fighting back. So Santino Ferrucci in the orange car, it's Nick Cassidy in the red car. So Santino Ferrucci then around the outside.
He's not going to get through there, but he will get past Boccolacci. That's Cassidy going through the inside into the chicane, and you know what? That signature looks like it's got absolutely no pace whatsoever through some of the slower corners. Ferrucci, he's seen Boccolacci struggle ahead of him. He's seen a position, you know, it's almost like an open mouth. He's going for it, and you know he will make an absolute dive eventually. I mean, Ferrucci and someone's off. In the background, can't quite see who it was. That might have been Solomon.
That was right across the grass, wasn't it?
It's a shortcut. It's not the quickest way around. Ferrucci, however, he's going to be lining up Boccolacci, or not Boccolacci, as they come over the start-finish straight.
So as we watch them as they head down towards turn 1, then Santino Ferrucci not close enough to be able to do anything. I don't think he wasn't. He's had to discretion the better part of Valor there. So it's Neville Jeffrey, isn't it, that is being hounded by Motorsport car.
It's Michele Beretta just behind him, and behind Beretta it's McLeod. Behind McLeod it's Lorandi and Sims and Solomon, and you know what? That is a very, very tight battle, and it really looks as if Jeffrey, he's struggling at the moment. He had a bit of a contretemps, shall we say, with Lorandi coming down the start-finish straight yesterday, which almost which gave us a bit of a momentary heart attack, shall we say.
Some warnings are coming in now as we watch our race leader, who seemingly we've almost forgotten about because he's 1.2 seconds up the road and he's trouble-free, isn't he? Car number 6, that is Michele Beretta being warned about track limits, and also being warned about track limits is Tatiana Calderon as well. And seen lots of examples as they have excurted over the track white lines. Felix Rosenquist and Jake Dennis then P1 and P2 now. we watch Jake Dennis, the Racing Steps Foundation driver, who has pulled a little bit back to Felix Rosenqvist, but once again, Felix Rosenqvist will just be managing this, won't he?
Absolutely, and this is a little bit of a kind of line of stern job up front as the Prema team are 1, 2, 3. Russell, however, he's still in a good job for Carlin in 4th place, but he's got a little bit of pressure because he's got Seta Camara, Fittipaldi, Leclerc just behind him, all gunning for 4th place, especially Leclerc, who needs a good result after a few dry weekends.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The order on the screen for you then as once again they head down towards turn 1. Just under 20 minutes of racing left to come. Oh, and a bit of barging between the two of them there.
It's Lorandi and McLeod, and McLeod is just driven clean through.
That.
I mean, that is not even an attempt to take the corner. He's actually gone through the orange and white cones. That's just ridiculous. And I hope the stewards look at that and say, no, you cannot take that kind of shortcut, and you can't just cross the track like that. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Not only that, he didn't stick to the track limits on the exit of that either. So
he even got the GT track wrong.
So we're watching Santino Ferrucci, the back end of the Santino Ferrucci car then. That is car number 5, just out of the points at the moment. Dorian Boccolacci still ahead of that car. And that the Pietro Fittipaldi car. Fittipaldi running in P6. Pietro Fittipaldi after Sergio Seta Camara, who is ahead.
One driver who's rise up the order has kind of come to a bit of a halt is Giovinazzi, who is now 3 seconds behind Leclerc. Now watch this. Okay, there's a little bit of a bump between Lorandi and McLeod as they come into turn 1, but there's no reason whatsoever. I see Lorandi takes the runoff area.
It did look like he just gave it a footful and thought, oh, to heck with it.
McLeod has a brake. He will argue that he's been forced off the track by Lorandi, but you know what? He's got a throttle, he's got a brake, he's got feet to use them, and hopefully he should use his head when going through those corners. Okay,
well, to appease your anger, car number 19 has been given a drive-through penalty.
Thank you.
Clearly listening to you, aren't they, Lee? So, half distance in terms of laps, 17 minutes left on the clock. The race being led by Felix Rosenqvist, who has a 1.2 second margin over P2, which is Jake Dennis, then it's Lance Stroll, George Russell, Seta Camara, Fittipaldi, Leclerc, Giovinazzi, Cassidy and Boccolacci rounding out the top 10.
Boccolacci, he's really fallen away from Cassidy's 1.7 second gap, but unusually it's kind of Ferrucci has now reached the point where he's off. He's struggling to find a way past Boccolacci, but you know what? He's got Kalamila in his mirrors as well.
So the black and white flags keep being flown. Interestingly, to Antonio Giovinazzi now as well. He's certainly going to have to watch that, and also to Alexander Sims. So those for non-respect of track limits, you tend to get a warning, and then the drive-through penalties start to be awarded.
Absolutely, and you know it's not just the track limits that the stewards necessarily look at. They'll also look at the timing screen and see that he's gone off track limits and set his personal best.
Yes.
5/10 quicker than Leclerc. You know, you say when you track limits, there's a grey area in the regulations where did the driver get an advantage, did they not get an advantage? Well, if they're keeping their foot in and actually able to maintain their pace by cutting the corner, that is an advantage, and the stewards have looked at that and said you can't do that.
Well, the order then, Rosenqvist maintains that margin over Jake Dennis, and as across the timing line now actually increases it by a couple of tenths. It's now 1.462, as you can see. Lance Stroll and George Russell, Seta Camara, Fittipaldi, Leclerc and Giovinazzi. Take a look at this for track limits then.
And that's Jake Dennis who's gone clear off the track limits, as did Lance Stroll,
as
does Russell, as does Seta Camara.
Well, in fairness, Pietro Fittipaldi and
Cassidy,
Giovinazzi stay in.
Why? I mean, why just let's extend the white line and make it part of the track? But then they probably go out further wide as well.
It's extraordinary. I mean, it can be done, as we just saw with Pietro Fittipaldi. He did manage to keep within the.
Interestingly, I was actually talking to Ferrucci after race 1 yesterday, and he was telling me he didn't qualify as well as he could have in the Q1 on Friday because he felt he was the only one who actually stayed within the track limits.
Right, so penalised for so doing, effectively.
Effectively, yes.
This is our race leader, Felix Rosenqvist, then, who has had a great weekend here at the Portimão circuit and finds himself right at the top of the championship table as we reach the sharp end of the championship, with just Nürburgring and Hockenheim still to come. Felix Rosenqvist and his team absolutely got the measure of this track, and he has that 1.4 second margin over Jake Dennis. Then it's Lance Stroll is P3 and George Russell is P4.
And Rosenqvist, you know what? He's just out front. He's got Dennis 1.4 seconds behind him. He's not challenged in the sense that Dennis is in his mirror. So he's just setting regular times in the early to mid 42s at 142.6 just there. Okay, Dennis has taken 1/10 out of him. But
but it's seesawing, isn't it?
Absolutely. But the point is, Rosenqvist, he's able to manage the race. He's managing his tyres. He's managing his cars. He's not on the threat. He's not pushing too hard. He's just setting the pace, doing what he does. He knows how to win races. He's won 8 so far this year. If he keeps on going like this, it might be number 9. Still a while to go yet.
Sergio Setakamara is another one that's been warned for disrespect of track limits. And as we saw that great shot of turn 1.
And it's interesting about this, Dave. We've seen so many black and white flags in this race. At what point are we really going to start getting drive-through penalties? As you said, the car 36, that's Sam McLeod. He's going to get a drive-through penalty. So many black and white flags have already been issued. Are we going to see an absolute raft of penalties in the latter part of this race?
It's possible. We were just watching Michaela Beretta in the Muka Motorsport car, and there is Michaela Beretta then in car number 6. Currently running down there in P18 with Lorandi ahead.
And Lorandi is actually just coming to focus for Beretta, because Alexander Sims has actually just passed him for 16th place. So Lorandi falling a little bit backwards.
Here, this reinforces the seesaw effect between Felix Rosenqvist and Jake Dennis in terms of lap times, doesn't it? And how Felix Rosenqvist is just managing that gap perfectly. He's not stressing the car too much. He's not stressing himself too much. And he is just managing this race absolutely perfectly. We have 12 minutes left to run and 8 laps. It's going to be close whether we go laps or time, to be honest. Pietro Fittipaldi then in the Fortec car number 12.
And notable, Dave, that the Prema cars, the 3 Prema cars at the top, they're regularly lapping in the mid 42s, doing it lap by lap. Everyone outside of that is in the 43s. Okay, it doesn't sound like a huge margin, as Jake and Dennis and Lance Stroll go so far off the circuit. They're in Spain. But the rest of the field are just not close enough. They cannot get into the 42s.
Okay, but George Russell for Carlin is one of those that is just able to keep with them, isn't he? You know, his best lap was a 1:42.968, but as you say, he's regularly just over the 43s, isn't he? Which just proves the pace advantage that Prema Power Team have.
Absolutely, and he's fallen. That's George Russell. It's Raoul Hyman taking a drive-through penalty.
Nabil Jeffrey is being given a drive-through penalty for jumping the start. So
and it's Hyman's coming out of the pit with a broken wing.
Nabil Jeffrey is running down there in P.
Well, sorry, that is McLeod. It's Sam McLeod. Sam McLeod has actually come out of the pits with a broken wing.
You're absolutely right. See it bouncing around now.
That is. Well, I suppose he did get a drive-through penalty, but at the same time, he got 3 laps to actually serve a drive-through penalty. So I would assume the team would have actually changed that first, and he'd do another lap and come back in again. But to send him back out with a clearly broken wing, it's a very unusual, and that's really not the kind of thing we'd expect to see in Formula 3. And I'm sure the stewards are kind of having the same reaction as us and getting the black and orange flag out, ready to get Sam McLeod back into the pits if he doesn't come by this time around.
Well, there you can actually hear it from the camera there as it's rattling against the tarmac. Now, the danger of that is, of course, as we've seen, if that becomes completely dislodged and goes under the front wheels, that's really, really bad news.
Absolutely, as Julio Moreno safely makes it around him. But that is one thing that the team have got to be aware of. You can't send the driver out with a partner that's clearly dislodged. It's one thing to maybe a winglet has broken at the end of the at the end of the front wing, but if the entire thing is dislodged, that could lead to a very serious accident.
So Nabil Jeffrey serves his drive-through penalty. We just saw Nabil Jeffrey making his way through the pit lane, that for a jump start. So Nabil Jeffrey gets penalised with a drive-through penalty, and sure enough, the black and orange flag is going to be shown to the Sam McLeod car.
We just got a quick shot there as well of the Seti Kamara, Fittipaldi, Leclerc battle there. I have to say, Seti Kamara and Fittipaldi, they're not two drivers we actually see in the higher reaches of the points too often. But you know what? They're doing their job this season. They're just learning. You're getting better bit by bit. As Sam McLeod does come back in this time, they get the front wing change, or they'll say no more today. But Seti Kamara, they don't get in the points that often. Same with Fittipaldi. But they've actually improved a bit over the year.
I've been quite pleased with Seti Kamara, to be honest.
And he did very well in the test days as well.
Yes.
He's getting quicker, but more importantly, he's doing it on a consistent basis.
The man that led the very first test here at the Algarve circuit is currently running in P3. That's Lance Stroll, as we see the Sam McLeod car being attended to right now with the new nose going on the front of that. They will send that car out again because, of course, it will be able to feed back some data, won't it? So they will use it. So, but going back to Seti Kamara and Fittipaldi that we were talking about, as you can see on screen, running in P5 and P6 at the moment. Felix Rosenqvist has turned the wick up a little bit now on Jake Dennis. 2 seconds as once again they all go over the track limits, and the brilliant camera angle is able to illustrate that absolutely perfectly. Rosenqvist, Dennis, Stroll, Dennis Russell, Seti Kamara and Fittipaldi P5, P6, then it's Leclerc in P7.
Speaking of consistency for Seti Kamara, that needs to be addressed with regards to track limits as well. That is McLeod, he's actually just letting the back of the field through. As Julio Moreno, did he just clip the end of Raul Hyman?
I don't know. But Julio Moreno in the number 17 car, Raul Hyman in the 38, and back end twitch there a bit.
But just continuing my point, if you're going to be consistent, you need to apply the track limits to everyone, not just the guys who are in the pack.
Sure.
With Dennis and Stroll consistently flying well off the circuit, the stewards need to look at that and say, look, you need to stay within the white lines. It has to be all four wheels. Within at least all four wheels, one of the four wheels within the white lines. They're not doing that in the slightest. They're so far off the track that they're gaining an extra bit of pace into turn 3.
Well, we've seen Dennis and Stroll certainly through that turn, haven't we? I was just looking to see whether we do see George Russell, because in terms of lap times, it's the top end of 42s, with the exception of Felix Rosenqvist, who does a 42.763, then 42.778 for Jake Dennis. There's a 43.039 for Stroll, and George Russell in the 43s as well.
You know, I think in regards to times, I think we're beginning to see the tyres maybe
just
drop off a small bit now. As I said at the start of the show, it is actually a little bit hotter today. There was a bit of scrubbing with the rain came last night, so maybe there's a little bit of abrasive layer on top of the road surface. So the tyres are beginning to drop off. We're not talking Formula 1 Pirelli kind of drop-off. Tank-up tyres will hang on easily to the end of the race, but it's when you start losing 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. But you know what? It's the same with everyone else. As we see, Lorandi is just taken to the pit lane. Whether that's a drive-through penalty or he has an issue with his Van Amersfoort car, we're not entirely sure yet.
Nicholas Polar is another one that's been warned about track limits. It's almost like, as we look at George Russell there in car number 10, who is running in P4 and seems to be quite comfortable in P4. He's not being challenged yet by Sergio Seti Kamara, although Seti Kamara is getting closer to George Russell. The Norfolk driver then, the winner of the BRDC Autosport Award at the right at the start of the year, and he announced that he was joining the Carlin squad to come into the FIA Formula 3 European Championship on the back of his success in BRDC F4 last year. So George Russell, Sergio Seti Kamara then is getting ever closer to George Russell, and over the closing stages of this race, George Russell is going to have to go into defensive mode, because he's certainly not been in a position to attack Lance Stroll, has he?
Absolutely not. Seti Kamara, now he's actually just broken a small bit away from Fittipaldi. That gap is just over 1.2 seconds, and now Seti Kamara, he's not having to worry about his mirrors as much, because Fittipaldi, he's in the background. He can focus on the back of George Russell. He's gunning for that 5th place. Now the gap was only half a second. Fittipaldi's still 1.2 behind. You know, Seti Kamara, he's not close enough to go for a move yet, but he's seen what Russell.
Be long.
He's seen what Russell does. He's seen his entries into the corner. He's seen his exits. He's looking at George Russell ahead, saying, "I know where you're getting it wrong, Mister. I'm going to go for a move in a few moments."
And what this will do now, and it will play out, is that as Seti Kamara then keeps his eye on George Russell, That will allow Pietro Fittipaldi just to get a little bit closer. So at the closing stages of this race, as Seta Camara then closes right in on the back of George Russell. This is the battle for P4 that we're watching at the moment, which is between George Russell and Sergio Seta Camara. There you can see the two cars, Sergio Seta Camara for the Moto Park team, George Russell for Carlin. And as I say, just think that as he starts this battle, that will allow Pietro Fittipaldi to get back into this battle as well. Pietro Fittipaldi, one of the Fortec drivers.
And just a note, as one of the former Fortec drivers and currently racing with Luca, Santino Ferrucci had actually climbed into the top 10 ahead of Dorian Boccalacci. He's actually just gone through the pits at the moment, so he's dropped out of the order. Looked like possible, maybe it may have been a drive-through penalty. I didn't see him stop, and it certainly didn't look to be any damage to the car when he came through the pits. So unfortunately that's taken Santino out of the action for the rest of today.
Well, Santino Ferrucci, who's provided lots of race action for us to enjoy over the course of this weekend, providing a masterclass in the Portimão circuit, though, is this man, Felix Rosenqvist, P1, then it is Jake Dennis, P2, Lance Stroll then on his own, P3, untroubled by George Russell, who is in his own battle now with Sergio Seta Camara right behind George Russell. And
I tell you, someone who's really moved up a little bit in the order, and he's about to lay on some pressure soon, is Nick Cassidy. Nick, who came in immediately, was on the pace in qualifying, hasn't had the best of luck in the first two races, but he's climbed up to 9th after starting 14th. He's now just under a second behind Antonio Giovinazzi, and here we will see the difference. Can Cassidy lay on that frame of power to Giovinazzi's Carlin machine? There's one's Mercedes and Cassidy in the back of his car, Giovinazzi running the VW engine, as you see on screen now. And this will be interesting because Giovinazzi lost a little bit of time to 7th place Charles Leclerc there. Cassidy doesn't need to push. He's not gunning for a championship here. He's just gaining miles. But you know what? He's a racer.
Absolutely.
He sees the position. He's saying, I want that 8th place.
Of course. So that is Antonio Giovinazzi then that we watch, and he is currently running in P8. Nick Cassidy is P9, Boccalacci is P10. Ahead of Giovinazzi is Charles Leclerc in car number 7.
And I wonder the other key thing to note, Nick Cassidy, he's not a full championship entry whatsoever, but he is racing in what was Brandon Maizano's old car.
Yes.
So Cassidy is actually eligible for points. So if Cassidy does actually pass Giovinazzi for 8th, that's points lost for Giovinazzi.
Yes, of course. So Felix Rosenqvist then, and gap down to 1.6 now between Felix Rosenqvist and Jake Dennis, P1 and P2. And it is Lance Stroll, who is very nearly 3.5 seconds behind before we get to George Russell and Seta Camara and Fittipaldi. Altogether P4, P5 and P6 with Charles Leclerc P7. Then it is Giovinazzi and Cassidy and Boccalacci we just saw on screen in rounding out the top 10.
And another nod today for Alexander Sims, who from the pit lane has climbed up to 13th place. Once again, just showing his absolute class as a racing driver. You know what? He's found himself in British GT. He's a championship leader at that moment, with a finale coming up next week in Donington. He's been very much an overlooked driver over the years, and he's once again proving his worth in downforce cars. He's done a lot of testing. He's actually run this chassis before, so it's not completely new to him, as he's done some testing for T-Sport and Double R, I believe. But you know what? He's in the racetrack again, a competitor, and he's a racer. He's picking off positions. He's not just, gaining miles, as it were. He's actually really putting his foot down and taking people off. He's just chasing Ryan Tvicher and Carlin at the moment to try and break into the top 12.
Well, that would be remarkable, and as you've quite rightly said, just proof of just how talented a driver he is. George Russell is really managing this well between himself and Sergio Seta Camara. Seta Camara has not been able to really hassle George Russell. We thought it was coming, but George Russell has managed this absolutely perfectly. So too is that man, Felix Rosenqvist. Jake Dennis then is got a little bit closer. We're on to the final lap now. He's just taken another couple of tenths out of Felix Rosenqvist, but he is just managing this so well, which is more than can be said for the track limits.
Felix, we've already said earlier on, he's a quality racer. He's a lot of experience. of Formula 3. Let's not forget that either. And he's won a race here before in the Formula Acceleration 1 that occurred for a few rounds last year.
Yes.
But you know what? He is a quality driver. He gets results. He's been in championship battles in Formula 3 before. Unfortunately, it just hasn't happened. He hasn't been able to move up the order to get promoted for various different reasons. But he's controlling this. This is looking like his 9th win of the season, as we see the battle continuing between Russell and Seta Camara. But he's reeling off another solid victory, and he's just going to really pull away from Giovinazzi, who in 8th place is only going to get 4 points.
It's been another faultless performance from Felix Rosenqvist, and he will be heading to cement his championship lead. There is the big loser, if you like. It's Antonio Giovinazzi, who's down there in P8. We are on the final lap of this final race of 3 across the weekend here at the Algarve circuit in Portimão, and it's just one more turn to do for Felix Rosenqvist as he will take yet another victory, and a fine one at that, where he has been completely untroubled. It will put him on 378 points as he takes the checkered flag. Another fine victory for Felix Rosenqvist. Jake Dennis takes P2, and Lance Stroll, it's another good drive from Lance Stroll to take P3. He crosses the timing lane now. George Russell should retain P4. Seta Camara is 5, then it's Fittipaldi, Leclerc, Giovinazzi P8, then it's Nick Cassidy before there is a gap back to Boccalacci, who takes P10. So they're doing the quick calculations now. Felix Rosenqvist will be on 378 points, Giovinazzi on 343.5, Leclerc on 324.5, Jake Dennis on 309. Well, Rosenqvist in a very, very commanding position in the championship, and has had a great weekend here in Portugal.
Absolutely, and you know what? This could be pivotal. If it's early in the season and you get a bad round, you can think to yourself, well, there's still the rest of the year to make something up. But now we're at the back end of the season. There's only 6 races left.
Yes.
And Giovinazzi will be kind of looking at the sizable gap between. It's a 34.5 points now behind. It's not a massive margin, but it's more than the race win, and that's going to make things difficult.
Well, of course it is, because you're relying on other drivers not to do well, aren't you?
Absolutely.
It's not only your performance, but it is the performance of those around you in the points that you are reliant upon. And well, as we look at Antonio Giovinazzi, then he is the big loser. The big winner is Felix Rosenqvist. And we go off now to a circuit where, of course, all the teams do have plenty of data, and they know how to make their cars work at both the Nürburgring and also Hockenheim. But certainly Prema Power Team are to be congratulated as well, because they've certainly produced a supreme car for the Algarve circuit.
Absolutely, they've nailed this. I believe that makes, this is astonishing little statistic. 3 races this weekend, 9 podiums, 8 have been for Prema Power Team.
As we get the result, then, Felix Rosenqvist takes the win from Jake Dennis P2, Lance Stroll P3, George Russell P4, Sergio Seta Camara then P5, with Pietro Fittipaldi taking P6, with Charles Leclerc, Antonio Giovinazzi, Nick Cassidy and Dorian Boccalacci rounding out the top 10 with positions 6 through to 10. Callum Eilert and Ryan Tvita, Alexander Sims, great drive from Alexander Sims to make it up to P13. Then it's Michele Beretta, Tatiana Calderon, Arjun Maini, Julio Moreno, Raul Hyman. Then it was Kong and Nabil Jeffrey, P19 and P20, with Matt Rao, Matt Solomon, Sam McLeod, Alexander Alban, Santino Ferrucci, Lorandi, Chang, and of course we lost Gustavo Menezes as well when we saw him talking on the pit wall. So, race 3 here in the Algarve done and dusted, and it's going to have a very familiar look to the podium, isn't it, which we'll be going up to very, very shortly as we watch the cars come in now. That was the George Russell car, followed by the car of Pietro Fittipaldi.
And you know, it wasn't a stunner of a race, but there was still plenty of action in the field, and sometimes it is wonderful to watch such powerful, impressive drives as what we've seen with Felix Rosenqvist. We didn't, to be brutally honest, we didn't actually see much of it because the field was had action going on elsewhere.
Yeah, of course. Well, it was not quite as an impressive jump as yesterday, as Rennie Ross in there from the Prema Power Team, and the rest of the Prema Power Team congratulate their steed Felix Rosenqvist. Then and be doing the same with Jake Dennis. And let's reinforce something I said yesterday about the height difference between those two drivers. It is quite some difference. And the FDA driver Lance Stroll, the Ferrari driver Academy driver Lance Stroll, with another very, very good result. So the drivers will be heading up to the podium.
That's 9 wins this season for Felix Rosenqvist. Can't help us. That's championship winning form.
Of course it is.
And I've forgotten how many wins he's actually had in Formula 3 full stop.
It's a significant amount as the drivers off to get weighed. And here come the highlights of the race then. And from the start, Felix Rosenqvist didn't put a foot wrong.
Significant start there from Jake Dennis. Got away from the line. Much better Lance Stroll as he moves onto the correct line coming into turn 1. Holds off Stroll as they go through the chicane and then makes absolutely certain of it by taking the inside into turn 2, solidifying that second place.
Stroll was determined to have a go, but he was busy having to defend from George Russell as well, who right at the very, very start spotted an opportunity to try and have a go at Lance Stroll. It all came to naught in the end. Another one trying to make his way up the field, of course, was Antonio Giovinazzi, as we see there, involved perhaps in that excursion that saw the loss of 2 cars. Sadly, with damage.
There's a big battle there between Sam McLeod and Tatiana Calderon and Alessio Lorandi, which kind of went on for most of the race until McLeod had to pit with a drive-through penalty and then a broken front wing.
Giovinazzi was constantly in a battle with Dorian Boccolacci, and Antonio Giovinazzi, with the most to lose in the championship, was doing everything he possibly could to try and get past Dorian Boccolacci, but Boccolacci was not going to make it very, very easy.
And you know what? Formula 3 has picked up a little bit of criticism this year, but that's good, that's clean, that's hard racing. No bumping, no ridiculous manoeuvres. As I say that, Alessio Lorandi did so with Sam McLeod, who then actually, that's probably where he broke his front wing, as the smashing into those curves as he went off for the GT circuit.
Yes, Lee back on his soapbox over that particular incident. As we continue to take a look now, this was something that we did question, and that was fairly constant, and that was the excursion of track limits, wasn't it? But Felix Rosenqvist with another utter masterclass as he takes another win here at the Portimão circuit, and there is the man himself.
It's actually a decent result as well for Jake Dennis. Another podium, but he's actually closed up to within 15 points of Charles Leclerc in the championship. We all look at who will be the championship winner, and all the congratulations and the laurels that go with that. But you know what? Second place in the Formula 3 Championship of Europe at the moment, that's a pretty big prize. Okay, if Dennis sees the championship maybe too far away, he's still looking P2, going, this is actually something I can put on my racing CV, and this will count to something in the future.
No, of course, there's no question about that. As we see the drivers relaxing there just at the back of the podium, there's always 2 podiums, of course, with the FIA Formula 3 European Championship, the race overall, and then the rookie podium too, as Felix Rosenqvist makes his way out onto the top step of the podium here at the Portimão circuit. Next we'll be seeing Jake Dennis. The tall, severe haircutted Jake Dennis. Very, very stylish. And Lance Stroll once again on the podium too.
He's a guy who's improved a lot in this latter part of the year.
Yeah, very much so. And Prema Power Team, of course, with yet more success. And stand by, national anthem to play out for Felix Rosenqvist. The 1, 2, 3, Felix Rosenqvist, Jake Dennis, and Lance Stroll. So as we see the 3 drivers on the podium, Felix Rosenqvist, Jake Dennis and Lance Stroll then, who will be receiving their trophies and yet more success here at the Portimão circuit in the Algarve in Portugal. Next round of the FIA Formula 3 European Championship comes up at the end of September at the Nürburgring. Then it is the final at Hockenheim in the middle of October. My thanks to Leah Gorman alongside me. Make sure you join us there next.